Will you pray for me? May the words of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Among the obscurer branches of late antique and medieval theological speculation is the quote-unquote science of angelology. Christian tradition, based on biblical sources like Daniel, Ezekiel, Isaiah, the Gospels, some of Paul's writing, and the book of Revelation, not to mention a fair amount of oral tradition and, depending on your point of view, imaginative speculation or revelation. Tradition has it that the angelic population of heaven is organized into 9 groupings or choirs of angels. Each choir has its own rank, purpose, physical or at least visual attributes, and dignity. At the very top, far and away above all the others, are the seraphim. They have 3 pairs of wings, one to cover their eyes in God's presence, one to fly with, one to cover their bodies. Their wings, depending on whom you ask, may or may not be completely covered with eyes. They are so bright that even the other angels cannot look at them without expiring. They tend God's throne and spend all day shouting praises to God. Holy, holy, holy. They sing all day long. Next come the cherubim, who are most decidedly not fat babies. They have 4 faces, a human, an ox, a lion, and an eagle, which just happen to correspond to the animals used to represent the writers of the 4 Gospels. They have 2 pairs of wings, which are assuredly, they tell us, covered with eyes. They serve as guards. The book of Genesis says that cherubim were set to guard the Garden of Eden after humanity was expelled. Next come thrones, who, unlike the others, have almost no anthropomorphic characteristics. They look like 2 sets of wheels, one within the other, each covered with, you guessed it, eyes. They serve as transport for the other angels, especially for the cherubim. Now, for these next few choirs, things get a little sketchy. Different authors call them different things and place them in different orders, and nobody seems quite sure what they do. But that hasn't stopped people from telling us. So here's my best shot at organizing them. Next come the dominions, who look like beautiful humans with wings. You've probably seen somebody portray them somewhere. Beautiful humans with wings, and they are in charge of different nations of the world. Next come the virtues, who, depending on whom you ask, are either in charge of the movements of the celestial bodies or are in charge of imparting their virtuous namesakes to humans, or maybe both. Next come the powers or authorities, who serve as warriors. In Christian mythology, Satan may or may not have been chief of the powers before he fell. So they say. Next come the principalities, who often wear crowns and carry scepters. They work with the powers, they carry blessings to the world, and are sometimes said to be a source of inspiration, sort of like muses. And finally come the lowest 2 choirs. If you've ever met an angel, it was probably one of these 2. They're the ones humans know best, are most likely to interact with. You've heard these names before, archangels and angels. Here we're on solid ground again, at least in terms of agreement among the medieval. Archangels, the second to last group, they look like gorgeous humans with wings, like some of their brethren. Some archangels you've heard of include Michael, guardian angel of Israel and of the church, and Gabriel, who announced Mary's pregnancy to her. Last, and least in stature, though not number, are just regular old angels. They are said to look pretty much like archangels, though they seem to be easy to confuse with humans, at least sometimes. It does keep happening in the Bible. They often show up as hosts, great in number, like that one making the annunciation to the shepherds outside Bethlehem. They are the least otherworldly, the most this worldly, the easiest for our brains to comprehend without exploding. Therefore, they are the best suited to interacting with us. Their name comes from the Greek word that means simply messenger, for that's what they are. Their special task is to bear messages to the created world from the divine realm. Above all these choirs sits, of course, Jesus, the firstborn of all creation, as Paul says, the firstborn from the dead, the high King of heaven, who rules, orders, deploys, manages, and just generally deals with all those angels. Today is Christ the King, or Reign of Christ Sunday, as they call it. Medieval images often show an empty tomb at the bottom of a picture and Christ enthroned in heaven at the top, ascending straight. Right above that tomb, he flies right up from the tomb and sits in that throne, and he's surrounded by those choirs, those ranks of angels, carefully painted with their attributes so everyone knows exactly which is which. Paul writes to the Colossians in today's scriptures, in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. This is where you can see Paul doing angelology. Now, trying to order the seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, principalities, archangels, and angels in their ranks may seem to you like just so much silly speculation. One step away from asking how many of these choirs can dance on the head of a pin. And you're right, this sort of thing can obviously get out of hand, and it can waste a lot of time. But what this sort of speculation does do is this. It communicates a trust that God has ordered the world aright. That there is some sort of plan for the world, that there is a system at work here, that at least some of God's ways are knowable. That, most importantly of all, the bases are covered, and the jobs that need to get done will get done. But here's what I don't understand. It seems to me that in their wisdom, these medieval speculators left a choir, God's most important choir, at least for those of us who live on earth, out. God comes to Paul one day on the road to Damascus to convert him. Asks him to stop persecuting those who follow Jesus, makes him into a follower of Jesus himself. And it works. Paul is converted. But he doesn't stop there. He could have just enjoyed life with God, could have just sat around praying and giving and doing good works and worshiping, but he doesn't. He is converted, and he goes out and he spends the rest of his life telling people about the life he has discovered in God. About the people who used to scoff at. He tells it to the people he used to scoff with. He went to the ones who had never heard about any of this before, and he tells it to so many people it lands him in prison and eventually kills him. He told them what it had felt like when he was trapped in a dark place. He said it was like he suddenly had found a life that was wild and lovely and adventuresome and gentle and free. He told them what it was like to have a purpose holy and high, not a mean purpose, not a selfish one, not a meaningless one, a real purpose. A purpose that would allow them to partake of the very power of the Creator of the universe. A purpose so achingly beautiful, it was worth dying for. Now, before I go on, I need to use a word. It's a controversial word, a word that some consider to be basically a swear word. It's not to be uttered in polite society, and certainly not from the pulpit of a church like this. It will make some of you angry. It will make most of us, and I include myself in that, uncomfortable. I'm sorry to do it, but it has to be done, so here I go. Evangelism. Do you feel that queasy feeling right here? Evangelism. If I'm not mistaken, that queasy feeling, that feeling you feel right here, that's the feel of crudely drawn cartoon tracts telling you you're going to hell if you don't do what the lady handing them out on the corner says. If I'm not mistaken, that's the feeling of opening your knocked-upon front door to find a freshly scrubbed 19-year-old with carefully parted hair, a conservative tie, and a great big smile. If I'm not mistaken, that feeling you feel down here when I say that word is what that terrible and silly question, "Have you been saved?" feels like. If you feel a mite queasy when I use that word, evangelism, there's probably a good reason. It's probably because you've had someone do it to you in the past, and it hasn't felt good. It's probably because those who have done it most, and to some degree most successfully, have had an understanding of our shared tradition very different from your own. And, most regrettably of all, it's probably because we, in liberal, progressive churches like Plymouth, have not been using the word, or more to the point, doing the deed, for a very long time. We have convinced ourselves that our wide open doors are enough. That all we have to do is open them as wide as we can and then sit in here and wait, and the world will come to us. But here's the thing. There's a whole world full of people out there who feel as if they live in some sort of dark realm where there is never enough money for all the Christmas gifts they must buy, for all the things from Hemmecker Schlemmer catalog that they want, who look at the rulers of this world attacking one another over petty claims, surveilling one another to find dirty little secrets, gathering their own citizens' email and phone records, posturing and filibustering and bickering, while people in the Philippines starve to death and the mentally ill wander the streets of their cities, going down to death by inches. There's a whole world of people out there who spend their money and their lives on things that do not satisfy and wonder why life has no beauty in it. They're not going to come to this place on their own because they think they know what they will find if they walk in here. Because they have been in other churches where they were told that they are not welcome because they are gay, or because they are women who have something to say about God, or because they insist that science, logic, and intellect have a place in the church. They have walked into other churches and heard hateful words. They have met people who bear the name Christian who have told them that they are going to hell, or they've never been in a church but have seen enough on TV to last them a lifetime. They have met others on the street corners or their front porches or at work who have told them that they are outside the promises of God, and they have believed it. There's a whole world full of people out there who don't know that the promises of God still hold. That hope is not a silly thing even in this world. There are people out there who don't know that church can be this good. Who don't know that there are Christians that are trying this hard. Who are trying to do it the way that we're trying to do it. And how will they ever know it unless a messenger comes to tell them? Good news. God does have a plan for dealing with this. There is a system at work here. There are beings, not heavenly ones to be sure, but there are beings who have been called to bear this message to the nations. And while you may not like it any more than Paul did, you know who they are. You don't have to stand on street corners. You don't have to knock on doors. You don't have to be preachy or creepy. You just have to be you. And you just have to be unafraid. If you need to leave work right at 5 to get to a Board of Christian Education meeting, don't tell your boss you have errands to run. Say where you're going and do not wince. If your friends want to know why you don't want to stay out too late on a Saturday night, be bold and tell them. If they despair over the state of things in the Philippines, tell them you know a people who don't feel helpless because they are doing things to help. Because they raise $750 for typhoon relief on one Sunday at the drop of a hat. If they seem surprised that somebody like you goes to church, tell them they ain't seen nothing yet and invite them along. Trust that you are a good, normal, high-functioning person. Trust that when they find out the truth about you, they will not think you're less cool for going to church, but will think that church is cooler because you go to it. If they ask why you are as good or as kind or as peaceful or as hopeful as you are, tell them what you know about God. If they are broken or beat down, tell them what you know. God will give you the words. That's what evangelism is. The world is in need of faith like you have here. The world is in need of places and people like Plymouth Congregational Church in the city of Syracuse. The world is in need of God, and God has a message for the people. Buried right there in the middle of that word evangelism is another word, maybe you noticed, angel. It is no accident either of etymology or of meaning. To do evangelism means simply this. It means to accept the call to be God's messenger, to bear the word of love to a tempestuous, broken, and beautiful world. It means simply this, to be an angel. So, because I believe that God has ordered the heavens and earth aright, because I believe that God has made a plan for the world and has made provision for its saving, because I believe that the people in this place have true things to say to the nations and that the nations need to hear them, I propose this, a 10th choir. It'll go like this: seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, principalities, archangels, angels, and you. So may it be. Amen.